just to get started, I know I've looked at your website. You have a really interesting background and path that you've taken to both puppetry and being involved in supportive of the autism community. Can you just tell me a little bit about yourself in general?
I started puppetry in high school, and then I got introduced to the autism community when I was in college. I was a nanny, and I was finding myself working with a lot of children who were autistic and on the spectrum. And so when I moved to Arizona after I got married in 2001, I was very young when I got married. I was only 22. I started working with an agency that asked if I would be willing to be placed with special needs families. And absolutely, that was always felt like a calling for me. I always felt like I was somehow gearing up to work with the disability community in some aspect. Little did I know. So I ended up getting training and became a habilitator. So I provided, habilitation support. And I worked with one particular family for 46 to 48 hours a week. So I was this little I was her, respite provider. I was providing Greenspan therapy. I was her in-classroom aide. I did so many things with this family. We became family. When I had my own child, he actually ended up getting diagnosed fairly late because he had a lot of coping strategies. So yeah, so I just ended up kind of, becoming even more a part of the community. And when I had him.
Well, and you had your puppetry interest too. And so were you doing that right along with when you started as a habilitator?
So my grandfather carved marionettes when we were little, and he always took my mom and her siblings to puppet shows. He always played with us. He was a woodworker, and I can remember being very, very tiny and being put into his sawdust bin. I just remember the wonderful smells and the sensation of sitting in this sawdust. And he let you be free. He let kids be kids no matter what they were like. And that was really special. And he gave that gift to my mom, and my mom gave that gift to me.
You were starting to say that was another part of your career or path, and so I just am wondering how that came about, because and how it came up that you ended up hearing about this opportunity and getting and becoming the puppeteer behind Julia.
So when I first heard about Julia, it was through a friend who is a puppeteer on the show that I'd met at a puppetry festival. And she and I had talked in the past. I saw that she was wearing an autism pin, and I was like, oh, maybe, like someone else. Because you recognize autism mamas usually, or at least people who are familiar with the community. And you're like, you're a safe person to talk to. And so she asked me if I had done much work with puppetry and autism in the past. And I have done programs with autistic schools or schools for children with autism, and always had, I just find it so wonderful because children connect with puppets on a different level than they do with squishy human faces that leave a lot to be desired in terms of like, what do you mean with these muscles? The puppets just don't have. Puppets are very truthful. There's lots of reasons that puppets work really well for everyone, but particularly with the autism community. She sent me a link to, oh, look, they've introduced this character. It was just so neat. And I turned to my husband and I was like, Todd, I'm Julia. And then I looked up at the ceiling and I said, hey, universe, I'm just going to put it out there. I would really like to be Julia someday. And then 6 months later, out of the blue, I get an email that's asking if it just said, we know you're a puppeteer and you have experience with autism. Can you tell us what your experience is? And I was like, oh my goodness, I'm talking to Sesame Street. They want to know about my life in the autism world. I'm just going to tell them that, never thinking that they were asking me as a puppeteer what I thought. I just thought, oh, they're seeking out voices in the autism community. And the next thing I knew, I was in New York at a callback. And then here I am 5 years later, almost to the day. Yesterday was my 5-year anniversary of starting on the show.
Amazing story. And I have to say, when I first saw your picture, I thought they must have designed Julia after they chose Stacey, because you just, you look like,
That's what I thought too.
You look like the puppet version of
Yeah,
you.
no, not at all. In fact, Lewis Henry Mitchell is the designer of the puppet, and he's one of the most kind and loving souls. And he had been volunteering at a school for children with autism, and he kind of based her on several children there, is what he told me. So I hope I'm not talking out of school for that, but he has one of the biggest hearts. And I really think that comes through in everyone there. Everyone's hearts come through in Julia. I think they're treating this so beautifully, including actually autistic people in the process all along the way, which we know is so important. And getting people from the community.
So what if, I know you've brought a lot to the role of Julia and learning and sharing her with the screen, but what have you learned from playing her that you didn't know beforehand?
I've learned so much about myself as a performer, about my own resilience, about my own need for boundaries, about my own about my own idiosyncrasies and the things that make me unique. I already knew how much she was needed, but I had no idea the impact that she would have.
And so lighter question, what's the most fun thing about playing Julia and the hardest thing?
Oh gosh. Can I say that the most fun thing is being on Sesame Street?
I'll take that.
Just like, being in that childhood place like all of the time, and playing with people and laughing. I mean, everybody on the set is so wonderful. It's yeah, how performing Mr. Grover, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And then what's the most challenging? I think the most challenging is trying to portray her in an authentic way, and still keeping the puppetry side up. It's, cameras and lights, and there is so much sensory input on a set. Paying attention and not getting lost. Yeah. So this is an older puppet. It's from I think the 50s or 60s. But yeah, just like seeing how they can connect and move and be shy. Yeah.
And it's very soothing.
It is. There's a reason that Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was so successful.
And so I also know that you mentioned you have some fun activities on your website about your puppet studio. And then you also mentioned you go to schools and teach classes. And do you do classes for children or adults with autism as well, or just they're fully inclusive classes, or just, I didn't know if you want to talk a little bit about, your work.
Yeah. So a lot of my workshops, especially right now because of COVID, I'm doing them all online, and I do my best to make sure that we're all able to accommodate. It's my job to accommodate. That's kind of how I view, and other people in the class have always, been fully accommodating as well. So, when I have workshops in my studio, sometimes I have nonverbal adults, sometimes I have nonverbal children, sometimes they have an aide, sometimes they're on their own. Sometimes I go to schools specifically for children with autism. Sometimes it's just children or teenagers with learning differences. And sometimes it's, public schools. And I do corporate workshops and things like that, which is kind of my favorite because I love teaching adults because kids already know how to play. And adults sometimes forget how to play. So there's an anecdote that I say a lot, but I was doing a workshop for a lot of bankers at a particular bank. And there was a guy who was kind of grumbling that he had to be there, like, why do we have to do this? And then by the end of the workshop, he came up and he was like, look, I made a baseball hat out of half of a ping pong ball and fabric and a pipe cleaner. And he'd made this accessory for his puppet and he was really proud. And he should be, because I wouldn't have thought of that. Like everybody, regardless of how creative they think they are, everybody is creative. It's just a matter of letting go of some of the things that tell us to be grown-ups and stay out of that world.